Hello, I'm Rob Moreau, your host of North Shore Gems, where we explore some of the real treasures of the North Shore region. You know, Louisiana has had a long and distinguished maritime history, going back to the early settlers who once used this vast network of bayous, rivers, and lakes for their survival, and for a highway to go back and forth between the sea and the interior part of the state. We're going to explore some of that history today at the Lake Pontchatrain Basin Maritime Museum, located on the banks of the beautiful Tchefuncte River, right near Lake Pontchatrain here in Madisonville, Louisiana. Come join us. Madisonville's maritime history dates back to the time before Europeans arrived. And even afterwards, this area continued to thrive on the water. That's because the Tchefuncte River provided an outlet to Lake Pontchatrain, which in turn created a base for all kinds of waterborne activities: fishing, commerce, transportation, and the exploitation of raw materials, all of which are showcased in the museum. In fact, the Lake Pontchatrain Basin Maritime Museum sits on the site of the old Yankee boatyard, which is probably best known for building ocean-going wooden vessels for the U.S. government during World War I. The Maritime Museum is the repository of that knowledge and seeks to celebrate that tradition and keep its heritage alive. On this day, we join the third graders from the Mary Queen of Peace Catholic School based in Mandeville. This is a great place for school kids to visit, as the museum has a whole roster of activities planned around children in the water.
So there is water under the ground, and it's actually really clean water, because as it goes from the grass down into the soil and into the ground, it gets filtered, almost like a sponge.
Our first stop was to play a learning game about the water cycle. So we got to make bracelets where the colors of the beads represent different stages in the water cycle. I'm in the wrong profession. I should have been a jewelry maker.
My name is Mrs. Thurston, Mrs. Benjamin Thurston. My given name is Susan. Well, Mr. Thurston and I are originally from Massachusetts. In 1836, we moved over to Ohio. Now, in 1837, we moved down to New Orleans area.
We had a visit in time from the old lighthouse keeper's wife, Mrs. Thurston.
Well, Mr. Thurston's job, there's a light up here, and you put a lantern up here, and he had to make sure that light was lit, especially at night and especially in the storms. Well, when he put a lantern up here, though, lanterns would put soot on the lights, and soot is a black stuff that attaches itself to lights, to the windows. And he had to go up there and make sure it was clean, because when those windows are dirty, that light does not shine through. So it was his job to make sure that that light was always shining. I am portraying Mrs. Thurston, Mrs. Susan Thurston. My husband Benjamin. We were the first keeper of the lighthouse. And I have researched everything I portray here so that it is factual. It's fun, but it's factual. And I wanted to make sure that the kids learn something and don't know they're learning. So we have a lot of fun with this.
The submarine goes down, goes under the enemy vessel, but remember, out here in the dark is that barrel full of gunpowder, and it had a triggering device on it, and when it hit the side of the enemy vessel, what would happen? Boom! And boom right where it needed to happen, right at the water line of the enemy vessel.
We got to crawl inside a Civil War submarine, which I did despite my claustrophobia.
This is the size. Now, he's a full-grown man.
My cousins locked me in an ice chest when I was a kid, and I think that's what happened.
This is the actual size
Oh boy. This is pretty tight. I mean, this is really pretty tight. For 3 guys to be in here, I would imagine there's not a lot of air. That's why they couldn't have candles, because they didn't want to use up the rest of the oxygen with a flame.
Exactly right.
You know,
And see, they sat opposite each other. And that was a big, you can see it here on the drawing, the crank that they used. And then the crank went into a gearbox, which gave them some mechanical advantage, and that turned a fairly good-sized prop at the stern. We think that it moved through the water about as fast as a man could walk.
but I would think, I mean, the biggest issue is, you know, it's dark in here, and then they lower you into the water. How do you know where you are?
Well, see, that's the thing. They could only attack an anchored vessel.
Yeah.
The vessel couldn't be moving because
So they
once they
guessed
lost
while
visual
rowing how
contact,
fast.
they had no way to locate their target. So the vessel they're attacking had to be at anchor,
Right.
and it had to be pitch dark because any light reflecting off of this, it could have been seen by a surface vessel. And most of the surface vessels operating at that time were steam powered or a combination of sail and steam, and they were much faster than the submarine.
Right.
So they would have been run down in, in very
But then
little
you'd
time.
have to have an estimate of how far away you are from this anchored vessel to let the line out and do all
We think
those things.
realistically maybe half the length of a football field before they dive to sub.
Right.
They'd get as close as possible in the dark. But we know it worked because they sunk those test targets out on Lake Pontchatrain.
And the sub was on another ship? Did you say? I missed that part. Or was it on land and then
It operated from the canals. It operated from a water base.
So they would get into this thing
through that hatch right
while it was in the water?
while it was in the water. Yeah.
So they'll get wet.
Some brave folks.
Yeah.
All right, I got to get out of here.
Okay, let me show you after
Oh, yeah, the walls are closing. You know, this is the kind of field trip that kids just love. Old boats, submarines, history of war, history of maritime work, and that whole environment. It's just a great place for kids to come to. I'm having a blast.
Now reach down and grab the line that looks like this on the ground by your feet.
Now, every good sailor needs to know his knots, and we are no exception. And so our last stop of the morning was a knot tying clinic.
If you start with your right hand, you go right over left, and then the second part, you go left over right. So watch me first.
Now bring it up under. No, bring this one up under. Okay? Now, left over right. See, left over right. Now come up right there. There you go. Now pull it. There you go. You see? You can always see the two come out this way, and then the two come in this way. It's a perfect square knot. In the summer months, the Maritime Museum hosts 3 ROV workshops for kids aged 10 to 17. In case you didn't know, ROV stands for Remotely Operated Vehicle. Over the course of a week, each student constructs their own underwater robot, in addition to going on field trips where they get to tour local manufacturers of ROVs.
They learn about buoyancy, they learn about how electrical circuits work, so it's a full, intense program. One of the teaching ideas right now is the STEM program, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and we've tried to make sure that all the students are very well versed on that.
Tell me what some of the most important fun things you learned in this camp are.
Well, I learned that life isn't just the Xbox. There's more, there's a lot of fields in it, and I did not realize how hard it would be just to build a simple ROV with thrusters, buoyancies, and all that technical, electrical. It's a lot of work.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Racers, on your marks. Get set, go.
At the end of the week, a competition is held at the pool in Southeastern Louisiana University's kinesiology building. How did the competition go for you?
Well, the first time my upper propeller fell off, and then the second time, I just the trick is kind of go forward, and then right when you're about halfway down, you go down, and then you kind of move until you can get it.
Right.
And the fastest that was ever is 53 seconds, and that was done by a girl, and I set the fastest for a male.
Which was how fast?
55 seconds.
That's pretty good.
2 seconds behind.
We had a visitor here from NASA that talked about all the things that ROVs are used for. And a lot of the space operations, all of that, whether we are teaching underwater ROVs, everything is basically related. And the children really are able to pick up the idea that all of this ties together and is available for them to look at as a career.
What kind of interest does this give you going forward?
It interests me a little because, well, it interests me a lot because I knew a little bit about science and technology, the STEM program, and that interests me, and so I wanted to really follow that in my career, and so I'm in school and I'm really following that so far. Hopefully I keep up with that, and this just taught me a little bit more and made me want to do it a little bit more in life.
Now, in case you're wondering about the grown-ups, you should know that the Maritime Museum conducts a boat building workshop every Monday and Wednesday evening, and you actually get to build your own wooden boat.
I'm making a replica of a Pierpont skiff, the type the Cajuns use for fishing and hunting and trapping. I'm a CPA by profession, and I was fired as a carpenter's helper after 3 days in college, so I'm conquering my old failures. But building this boat was the most enjoyable thing I've ever done, really. Making something with your own hands, you know. It's just been enjoyable. What started all this was the first wooden boat festival. I saw a wooden boat, and I thought, that's beautiful. I want to build a wooden boat. So that's what started it. They have a place to build it. You know, it's enclosed, surrounded. They have the tools to work on the boat, and they have a teacher to show you what to do. You pay for the materials and pay for your time that you work on the boat. While you're working on it, you've got to flip it up, you know, turn it over and upside down, and you got people to help you turn it. I wouldn't attempt it at home. To buy the tools, to have a place to work, and you couldn't do it by yourself. And certain parts of it takes 2 people or 3. So this is the best place where you got other people can help work with you. It's the most enjoyable, the sense of accomplishment. The teacher called me a craftsman because I changed some things, and it's your boat. You do whatever you want with it. You know. So that's the good part about it. And it's a pride of construction, and it's something you created. You know, so. And everybody's the same way about it, I think.
Perhaps the biggest event of the year is the Maritime Museum's Wooden Boat Festival, held annually on the 2nd or 3rd weekend of October. It boasts over 100 wooden and classic boats in attendance and attracts a crowd of around 30,000 people.
The Wooden Boat Festival actually got started with just a small group of people that wanted to have something along the banks of the Tchefuncte River here in Madisonville. There was a small core group of people that put it on. It grew from their idea of having a maritime museum, and it just mushroomed. If they have children, the biggest highlight is that the Woodworkers Guild, the St. Tammany Woodworkers Guild, builds small wooden boats and gives those away to the kids. That is probably the most popular feature of the festival if children are involved.
The highlight of the festival is a quick and dirty boat competition, where crews of 4 to 6 people are given 14 hours to build a boat out of materials provided them.
They give everybody the same amount of plywood and materials. They give us 2.5 sheets of plywood, real thin stuff, you know, it's like glue-on interior plywood. And a couple 2x4s and some 1x2s, and they give you a handful of screws, a couple of tubes of caulking, and some rope and some sailing material, and they blow the whistle and say, start building a boat.
It's almost a festival within a festival. and it brings a lot of the spirit of Mardi Gras to the event, as the teams often pick a theme, dress up in costume, and give silly names to their boats. When the time comes, they all parade down to the waterfront for the contest.
They start Saturday morning and finish by noon on Sunday. We then take those boats and allow them to compete in the river on a rowing downstream and sailing back upstream. And probably the biggest part of that is whether or not they can actually float.
So quick and dirty and wet.
And quick and dirty and wet is exactly right.
The winners get a cool trophy, and more importantly, bragging rights for the year.